Summer heat vacation, wild nights, party lights, and desire by the sea. Summer, a time for freedom, adventure, and wild nights that blur the line between fantasy and reality. A time when the heat of the sun lingers long after it sets, and the ocean breeze carries secrets whispered under the moonlight. For us, this wasn't just a vacation, it was an escape. A chance to leave behind the expectations of the world and surrender to something untamed, something intoxicating. But no one expected how far it would go, how a simple summer getaway would turn into a storm of hidden desires, forbidden touches, and emotions too powerful to contain. Under the pulse of the music, under the glow of the firelight, we found ourselves drawn into something we never saw coming. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. This is a story of passion, secrets, and the kind of summer that changes everything. Let's dive into a world where the nights are endless, the lines between friendship and something more begin to blur, and the heat of the season is nothing compared to the fire burning between us. The sun was setting behind the horizon, bleeding gold and crimson into the sky as the warm ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and sun-kissed skin. The car ride had been long, but as soon as I stepped out and laid eyes on the beachfront villa, I knew this summer would be unforgettable. Laughter and the distant thump of music drifted from inside, where my friends had already settled in. The place was stunning. White walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a private infinity pool that overlooked the endless blue of the ocean. It was ours for the next few weeks, a haven of freedom, adventure, and whatever wild trouble we decided to get into. Finally, Lucas grinned from the doorway, his arms spread wide as if welcoming me to paradise. "Took you long enough. We were about to start the party without you." I smirked, dragging my suitcase up the steps. Wouldn't dare let that happen. "Who's already here?" Lucas slung an arm around my shoulders as we walked inside. "Malik's setting up drinks. Mateo and Jordan are probably half naked by now, and... oh, Damien's here too. He's been asking about you." The name sent a sharp jolt through me. Damien. I hadn't seen him in months, but the way my pulse kicked up at the mention of him told me nothing had changed. He was still him, effortlessly magnetic, painfully attractive, and completely unaware of the way he wrecked me every time he so much as looked in my direction. We were just friends. And yet, every summer, whenever we found ourselves in the same place, the air between us felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. Something neither of us dared to name. As I stepped into the house, I spotted him immediately. Damien stood near the open balcony, a glass in his hand, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal toned abs and golden skin from the sun. He wasn't doing anything, just existing, just being, but that was enough to send my thoughts spiraling into dangerous places. His gaze found mine across the room, and for a second, the world shrank to just the two of us. "Look who finally made it," he said, voice smooth as silk. I forced a smirk, pretending my chest wasn't tight with something I didn't want to name. "Miss me already?" Damien tilted his head slightly, considering. Then, slow and deliberate, he smirked. Something twisted low in my stomach. Lucas clapped his hands together, breaking the moment. "Come on, let's get you a drink. We've got a whole summer ahead of us." By the time the sun had disappeared completely, the house was alive. Malik had set up the fire pit on the beach. Mateo was already dancing shirtless, and Lucas had convinced half of the group that skinny dipping was an essential part of the night. I sat on the deck, drink in hand, watching the way the flames flickered against the darkening sky. The laughter, the music, the heat. It should have been enough to distract me, but my eyes kept finding him. Damien stood by the fire, deep in conversation with Malik, a lazy grin on his lips as he sipped his drink. His posture was relaxed, effortless. Everything about him seemed dangerously intoxicating. "You're staring." Matteo plopped down beside me, the glint in his eyes unmistakable. I scoffed. "I'm not." Matteo took a sip from his drink. "You totally are. And you have been for years." I exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand down my face. "It's complicated." Matteo raised an eyebrow. "Is it? Or do you just make it complicated?" Before I could answer, Damien turned, and his gaze locked onto mine. The air shifted. It was 1 second, 2, 3, and then, slowly, almost as if he knew exactly what he was doing, he smirked. My stomach tightened. This summer was going to ruin me. The night had settled into something reckless and intoxicating. The bonfire crackled against the sound of the waves, music pulsing through the warm air, and drinks kept flowing like there was no tomorrow. Laughter filled the space, bodies moved without inhibition, and the usual tension between us all started to blur into something else entirely. I sat on the sand, watching the flames dance, but I wasn't thinking about the fire. I was thinking about Damien. He was standing near the water now, his pants rolled up to his ankles, the moon casting silver against his tanned skin. Too beautiful, too effortless, too much. "You're hopeless," Matteo murmured next to me, sipping his drink with a knowing smirk. I scoffed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Matteo nudged me with his elbow. "Right. That's why your eyes haven't left him all night." I wanted to argue, to pretend like this wasn't something I was actively trying to suppress, but I couldn't. Not when every stolen glance, every second of eye contact, made my heart beat too fast, too hard. "Hey!" Lucas suddenly shouted from the other side of the fire, grinning wildly. "Truth or dare?" A groan rippled through the group, but we all knew how this night was going to end. It was tradition. Every summer, every year, the game always pushed boundaries, always exposed secrets. "Fine," Malik said, rolling his eyes. "I'll start. Matteo, truth or dare?" Matteo smirked, stretching his arms behind his head. "Dare, obviously." Malik's grin turned wicked. "Kiss the hottest person here." A round of oohs and laughter spread through the group, and Matteo barely hesitated before pulling Jordan in for a filthy, drunken kiss that had everyone cheering. More rounds passed. More dares, more secrets, more lines that got pushed closer to the edge. And then, "Damien," Lucas called, eyes flicking between him and me. "Truth or dare?" I held my breath. Damien's gaze flickered toward me for the briefest second before he answered. "Dare." Lucas grinned, drunk and reckless. "Kiss the person you've wanted to kiss all summer." The world froze. My stomach plummeted. Damien's lips curled slightly, but there was something dangerous in his expression, like he knew exactly what he was doing. And then, he started walking toward me. The cheers and laughter around us faded into nothing. Every nerve in my body was suddenly on fire, my heart pounding so violently that I was sure everyone could hear it. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. And then, he stopped. Not in front of me, not even close. Instead, he turned slightly, leaned down, and kissed someone else. Lucas. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. The kiss was brief, almost lazy, and when Damien pulled away, he was still looking at me, like he wanted me to feel every second of it, like he wanted me to know that this was a game I wasn't allowed to win. "Happy?" he asked, voice smooth as sin. Lucas laughed, clapping him on the back. "Hell yeah!" The game continued. The night moved forward. But I didn't. I sat there, heart hammering, stomach in knots, realizing that Damien had just told me everything without saying a word at all. This summer was going to kill me. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the fire died down, after the music faded, after everyone stumbled inside the villa, drunk on alcohol and adrenaline, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about him. Thinking about the way Damien kissed Lucas. Slow, deliberate, almost lazy, as if it didn't mean anything, as if it wasn't meant to destroy me. But the worst part wasn't the kiss. It was the way he looked at me while doing it. Like he wanted me to know that he could have kissed me, but didn't. Like this was a game, and I was losing. The sheets were too warm against my skin, the air in the room too thick, and the sound of the waves crashing outside only made my chest feel heavier. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling slowly. I needed to get out of here. The house was quiet when I slipped outside, the deck cool beneath my bare feet. The moon still hung high in the sky, casting silver light over the water, the waves rolling in with a rhythmic hush. I took a deep breath, letting the salty air fill my lungs, trying to clear my head. And then, I wasn't alone. A figure sat on one of the lounge chairs, legs stretched out, glass in hand. Damien. My stomach tightened. He glanced up, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Couldn't sleep? I hesitated before stepping closer. Something like that. Damien swirled the liquid in his glass, watching the way the amber color caught the light. Me neither. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to demand answers, but instead I just sat in the chair beside him, the silence stretching between us like a fragile thread. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, "Are we gonna talk about it?" My voice came out quieter than I expected. Damien smirked, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Talk about what?" I clenched my jaw. "You know what." His gaze flickered toward me, something dark and unreadable in his eyes. "You mean the game?" I exhaled sharply. "You know what I mean." Damien set his glass down on the table beside him, leaning back, arms folded behind his head. Too relaxed, too composed, too Damien. "And what do you want me to say?" he mused, tilting his head slightly. I swallowed hard. "You kissed Lucas." He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "So, that was the dare, wasn't it?" My chest tightened. "You could have kissed anyone." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, his gaze drifted toward the ocean, his jaw tensing just slightly. "Yeah," he murmured. "I could have." The words hit me like a slap. I looked away, my hands curling into fists against my lap. "So that's it then? Just a game?" Damien sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "You're making this complicated." I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Damien, you're making this complicated." Another silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then, "I thought you weren't interested," he said quietly. I turned to him sharply. "What?" He met my gaze, and for once, there was no smirk, no teasing glint in his eyes, just something raw. "I thought you didn't want this," he said, his voice lower, rougher. "So I didn't push." My breath caught. I didn't know what to say. Because I had spent years pretending I didn't want this. Pretending that my feelings for Damien were nothing but a summer crush, something fleeting, something I could ignore. But now, sitting here under the moonlight, the tension between us undeniable, I realized I had never wanted anything more in my life. But before I could respond, before I could finally say something real, Damien pushed himself up, grabbing his glass. "Good night," he muttered before walking back inside, leaving me drowning in everything I couldn't say. The next day, everything felt off. The house was still buzzing with the aftermath of last night, Bodies draped over couches, empty bottles scattered across the deck, the air thick with the scent of ocean salt and leftover drinks. But beneath the hangovers and laughter, there was something else lingering. Something between me and Damien. Something that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, and I had just refused to see it. I caught glimpses of him throughout the day, lounging by the pool, laughing with Lucas, stealing glances when he thought I wasn't looking. But he never came near me, never tried to finish the conversation we started last night. And the more I thought about it, the more it ate at me. By sunset, the house had come alive again, the energy shifting back to reckless summer chaos. Music pounded through the speakers, lights flashed from the patio, and voices blended into a drunken, feverish mess of bodies moving together. I was in the kitchen, pouring another drink, when I felt him. Damien, standing behind me, close, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. I didn't turn, didn't trust myself to. Then, his voice, low, quiet, right against my ear. "You've been avoiding me." I let out a sharp breath, gripping the counter. "You've got it backward." Damien chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Just something dangerous, something that made my stomach tighten. "Funny," he murmured, "because last night, it felt like you had something to say." I swallowed hard, pulse pounding. This was it, the moment I had avoided for years, the moment I had run from every single summer. I turned to face him, and suddenly, we were too close. His breath was warm against my skin, his gaze dark, unreadable. "You want to know what I was going to say?" I whispered. Damien's jaw clenched. "Yeah." My heart slammed against my ribs. "That I hate this game," I said. "That I hate the way you act like none of this means anything." His expression shifted. "And what if it does?" His voice was barely audible over the music. Something snapped inside me. "Then stop pretending it doesn't." Silence. A dangerous pause between us. Then, he grabbed my wrist, pulling me with him through the crowd, through the flashing lights and heat and bodies grinding to the music. He didn't stop until we were outside, where the waves crashed against the shore, the only sound between us. Then, he let go. I exhaled sharply, pulse racing. "Damien." He turned to me, and suddenly, everything spilled out. "I can't do this anymore," he admitted, voice tight. "I can't keep pretending that every time I look at you I don't—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. But I knew. I had always known. And I wasn't running anymore. So I did the only thing I could. I grabbed his shirt and kissed him. And he kissed me back, hard, like he had been waiting forever for this. Like this was the only thing that had ever mattered. The ocean roared behind us, the night burning hot, and suddenly everything made sense. Everything felt right. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. A voice behind us. "What the hell is this?" We pulled apart, breathless, wide-eyed. And standing there, watching us, was Lucas. And he looked devastated. Buskar. The moment I saw Lucas's face, my stomach dropped. Damien tensed beside me, his breathing still ragged, his hands clenched into fists. The taste of his lips still lingered on mine, the heat of his touch burning into my skin. But now, it all felt like a mistake. Not because I regretted kissing him, but because Lucas had seen it. And the look in his eyes wasn't just shock. It was pain. He took a slow step forward, the ocean breeze ruffling his hair, his expression twisting into something unreadable. "So, this is what's been happening behind my back?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out, because I didn't know what to say. Lucas had always been the loudest, the wildest, the one who never seemed to take anything seriously. But right now, standing under the moonlight, he looked completely shattered. Damien took a slow breath. "Lucas, how long?" Lucas's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. His eyes darted between us, his chest rising and falling too fast. "How long have you two been, whatever the hell this is?" Damien hesitated. "Too long," Lucas scoffed, shaking his head. "Jesus, I should have known." "Lucas, it's not—" I started, but he cut me off. "Not what? Not real?" He let out a bitter laugh, his jaw clenched. "Because it looked pretty damn real from where I was standing." My pulse hammered. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "Yeah?" Lucas folded his arms, his voice rising. "Then why did it?" Silence. Damien shifted beside me, his hands tightening at his sides, his mouth set in a firm line. He never looked like this, never looked uncertain. But right now, I could feel the weight of all the things he wasn't saying. Lucas's eyes darkened, and suddenly it hit me. This wasn't just about me and Damien. This was about him, too. My breath caught. "Lucas." He let out a sharp exhale, shaking his head again like he was trying to get rid of a thought that wouldn't leave. Then, his expression changed, hardened. "You know what? Screw it." He forced a laugh, though it sounded anything but amused. "You two have fun. Don't let me get in the way." Then, he turned and walked away. And something inside me broke. "Lucas, wait!" I called, but he didn't stop. Didn't even turn around. The sound of the waves crashed louder in my ears, the weight of the moment suffocating. I turned to Damien, chest aching, voice tight. "We have to fix this." Damien exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. "I don't think we can." The words hit me like a punch. I searched his face, looking for something, anything to prove that he wasn't giving up. But all I saw was guilt. Raw. Undeniable. Like he had known this would happen. Like this had been inevitable from the start. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "So, that's it?" Damien met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "What do you want me to say?" I wanted him to fight for this, for us. But instead he just turned away, staring at the dark waves, his hands shoved into his pockets. And for the first time I realized maybe we had already ruined everything. The house felt different, colder. The music played, the party continued, but the energy had shifted. Lucas was nowhere to be seen, and Damien, he was avoiding me. I felt it in the way he moved through the crowd, in the way he laughed too easily, in the way he didn't look at me. I found him outside, sitting on the deck, staring at the dark ocean. My chest ached just looking at him. "Are we going to talk about this?" I asked, voice barely above the wind. Damien didn't turn. "What's left to say?" I clenched my jaw. "You're just going to pretend none of this happened?" His fingers curled against the wooden railing, tension radiating from him. "Lucas hates us now." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Is that what this is about? Lucas?" Damien finally turned to me, his eyes shadowed, unreadable. "You think this is just about him?" My breath caught. The space between us was too much, too heavy, filled with everything we couldn't say. "Then what is it about, Damien?" I stepped closer, heart pounding. "Because I think—" He shook his head, cutting me off. "Don't." The finality in his voice sent a sharp pain through my chest. I knew what he meant. Don't push this. Don't make me admit it. Don't make me choose. The words I wanted to say never came, because at that moment Lucas appeared. And he wasn't alone. Two strangers, unfamiliar, dangerous-looking, flanked him. Lucas's face was unreadable, but his voice was steady. "We have a problem." Everything inside me turned cold.